They hugged you like nothing had happened, like years of silence didn't weigh between the arms. But heaven saw it. That moment, the one where their smile didn't match their eyes. It was subtle, so subtle that if you weren't chosen, you would have missed it. But your spirit caught the distortion immediately. The grin was wide, the voice warm, but there was a glitch, a tremble in their energy that said, "This welcome is a setup." You felt it in your stomach, a tightening, a knowing that wasn't just a family reunion. It was a spiritual ambush disguised as kinship. They had planned this day carefully. The seating, the timing, even the food. Every movement choreographed to draw you in, to make you forget what you knew. They thought you'd show up blind, but what they didn't know, chosen one, is that your discernment has leveled up. You walked in, glowing, charged, fresh from a season of divine sharpening. And while you smiled back, your spirit was already scanning the grid. You were not just attending, you were observing. Heaven had sent you in not as a guest, but as a witness. You noticed who didn't speak, who overcompensated, who looked you up and down like they were checking if the prophecy had fully activated in you yet. You felt it strongest when you sat down. The placement was no accident. Right under the ceiling fan with the slight hum, right next to the mirror that reflected your back. They placed you between two relatives who hadn't spoken in years, until today. You were the fuse between old wires they were trying to reconnect, not out of love, but to re-establish an old chain of power. But the signal from heaven was louder. You started getting flashes, sensations, like scenes from the past playing in your peripheral vision. A child hiding under the table. A grandmother whispering prayers in a language you never learned. A candle flickering against a family portrait. These weren't just memories, they were keys. The atmosphere was thick with performance, but your soul was already decoding it all. This wasn't just dinner. This was a disguised revival of a ritual they once tried on someone else and failed. And now they were trying again, with you. They offered you food with trembling hands. You felt the energetic fingerprint left on the spoon. You blessed it in your spirit before it touched your lips. Every word you said sent ripples through the room. Some smiled, others tensed. One even dropped a glass when you quoted scripture without realizing. That wasn't an accident. That was your light hitting their shadow. You were born for this moment, not to blend in, but to expose. And though they smiled, though they laughed, though they called you family, heaven saw the signal behind the smile, and so did you. You didn't choose that seat, they did, and heaven needs you to know that matters more than you realized. That chair wasn't just about comfort or view, it was a position, a placement. They wanted you in that exact spot, centered, observed, surrounded. From there, every angle of your aura could be measured. They thought if they boxed you in just right, they could reroute the current flowing through you. But they forgot who built the current. They forgot who sent you. The cushion sank under you differently than it did for the others. Your back tensed when you touched the wood, not from fear, but recognition. Your body remembered what your conscious mind hadn't caught up to yet. That chair had held others before you. People marked, people silenced. It was the designated throne of containment, a ritual relic disguised as family furniture. But the moment you sat down, something snapped in the atmosphere. You didn't bend to its history, you brought your own. Around you, conversations dipped into shallow waves. The volume of the room dropped imperceptibly, as if your presence redirected gravity. Someone across the table adjusted their napkin 3 times. Another fidgeted with a pendant around their neck, a charm older than the house itself. They were waiting, watching, not for your words, but for your reaction. This was their test, but they had no idea you've been tested by far worse than whispered spells and ancestral politics. You've survived rooms colder than this. You're not here to be studied, you're here to expose. You noticed the pattern carved under the table edge, subtle spirals like old Celtic bindings, the kind used to anchor spiritual weight. You brushed your fingers beneath it casually, but inside you were roaring. Someone had etched intention into that table years ago, maybe generations, and that chair was the center of the design. Their hope was that placing you there would trigger the script, that the bloodlines would behave as programmed, but they hadn't accounted for your free will, your divine upgrades, your spiritual disruptor codes that no ritual could override. The person next to you kept touching your elbow when they spoke, small, casual gestures, but every touch carried static, like they were trying to plant something. You smiled, but you shifted, just enough to break the link. You didn't need a confrontation, you needed confirmation, and God gave it. Right then, you saw it, the flicker in their pupil, the split-second glitch in their voice when they called you by your nickname instead of your real name. That was the moment heaven highlighted the play. Chosen one, they wanted to seat you in submission. But the mistake they made was thinking you were still who you used to be. The chair didn't hold you. You shifted the chair. The very object they used to contain others just became the platform where you began unraveling their plan. You sat in their circle, but you didn't belong to it. You came in glowing, and now the glow is starting to crack the grid. At first, it felt like background noise, just another face across the table. The kind of stare you've learned to ignore in public, in crowds, even in church. But this one didn't blink. This one didn't soften when you made eye contact. This stare wasn't curiosity, it was calculation. And heaven wants you to know that person wasn't just looking at you, they were measuring you. They never spoke much. The others laughed, filled the space with rehearsed stories and over-loud jokes, but not them. They sat still, watching you the way a gatekeeper watches a lock start to break. You felt it before you understood it, a tightening in your chest every time your eyes passed theirs. Your nervous system picked up what your conscious mind hadn't named yet. This one knows something, and it wasn't affection in their gaze. It was containment, memory, regret, maybe even fear. You asked yourself, why them? Why do they keep watching like they've seen this before? And then it hit. They had. They were there the last time this happened. Maybe not to you, but to someone like you. Decades ago. A cousin who vanished. An aunt who went off the grid. The one everyone says went strange. And that relative. They saw the glow in her too. But back then, they didn't know what it was. Now they do. And you are the resurrection of what they tried to silence. They weren't staring at your face, they were staring at your timeline, trying to pinpoint how far you'd come, wondering if it was too late to stop the prophecy they once buried in dirt and wine. The minute you smiled back with full knowing in your eyes, their stare cracked, just slightly, but enough. You caught it. A blink, a shift, a hand twitch under the table. That was the moment they knew. You saw them. Heaven whispered something then, not in words, but in weight. Your spine felt it, a phrase etched across your bones. They were part of the original binding. The ritual didn't begin tonight. It began long before you were born. And that relative, they've been waiting to see if it skipped you, or bloomed. Chosen one, you weren't sent here to be liked. You were sent here to reveal. And their stare was never about you. It was about what you represent. The unraveling, the return, the reactivation. They saw the shift in your glow the moment you entered, and no matter how much they tried to hide it, their eyes confessed it all. You didn't flinch. You didn't fold. You held their gaze long enough for the spell to break. The watching was supposed to weaken you. Instead, it confirmed you. And the silence between you both, It screamed truth into every corner of that room. It started like a harmless tale, a memory shared over food, laughter stitched into every sentence. But the moment they brought your name into it, you knew this wasn't storytelling. This was narrative control. And the version of you they painted, soft, quiet, passive, the kind of person who stays seated when the spirit says rise, the kind who forgets what they're carrying. But you haven't forgotten, not one bit. They spoke in warm tones, like they were honoring your past. But their words were weapons wrapped in politeness, a strategic retelling, a character assassination disguised as nostalgia. They made you smaller than you are, on purpose. Remember when you were afraid of everything? They said, laughing. But heaven remembers differently. Heaven remembers you praying in closets while they played ignorance in daylight. Heaven remembers the dreams you had that no one believed, the visions you silenced to keep the peace. That story they told, it was designed to anchor an old frequency, one that no longer belongs to you. They were hoping you'd laugh along, internalize it, wear it like a sweater that no longer fits. But you didn't. You smiled with your mouth, but your spirit stood up in full armor. You've outgrown that storyline. And no matter how many voices repeat it, it cannot bind what God has loosed. The most dangerous part wasn't what they said, it was what they left out. They skipped the part where you broke generational curses by just surviving. They ignored the miracles that kept you breathing in years where silence should have buried you. They erased the nights you cried out to God with no reply, but stayed faithful anyway. That's what they didn't say. And heaven heard it. One relative kept nodding like the tale was harmless. Another looked away, ashamed. There were witnesses in that room, not just people, but angels. And some of them were weeping, not because you were being humiliated, but because your silence held more power than their lies ever could. Chosen one, the reason that story felt off is because it was built on fear. Fear of who you're becoming. Fear of your voice. Fear that the real you will rewrite the legacy they tried to lock into place. But you don't need to fight with words. You are the proof. You are the living contradiction to their version. Every breath you take is revision. Every room you enter is correction. Every glow from your spirit is resistance. Let them talk. Let them pretend. Heaven is recording everything and rewriting it through your radiance. Their story was scripted for who you used to be, but you, chosen one, are walking in a version of yourself they can't narrate anymore. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't flip the table, but the atmosphere shifted the moment you inhaled. Something unseen rippled across the room, like static on a signal, like interference in a broadcast. They thought they had everything in control: the food, the seating, the stories, the tone. But what they didn't factor in was your presence, not your personality, not your past, your aura, the divine field that surrounds you like armor, tuned by fire, aligned by spirit, and encoded with heaven's fingerprints. When you spoke, the fork in someone's hand trembled. When you reached for the water, the glass tipped slightly toward you, though your fingers hadn't touched it yet. They noticed, not with their eyes, but with their bodies. One shifted uncomfortably in their chair. Another adjusted their collar like the room got warmer. They thought they were hosting you, but your frequency made them feel like guests in their own house. And that's the truth, chosen one. When you walk in alignment, even spaces built to contain you start malfunctioning under your light. Someone tried to crack a joke to reset the mood. You laughed politely, but the silence that followed said more than any punchline could fix. They were uneasy, not because you were rude, but because you were real, fully yourself, fully awake, fully divine. And that's what their rituals can't replicate. They can imitate noise, but they can't generate presence. The table physically held firm, but spiritually, it splintered. You felt the fault lines forming beneath the conversations. Words that used to hold power over you fell flat. Accusations veiled in concern bounced off your peace. Every attempt to minimize you echoed into nothing. They didn't know what to do with you anymore because you weren't responding the way the old you used to. And that's the danger you now pose to their control. You've become unrecognizable to their binding system. A cousin you hadn't seen in years suddenly excused themselves, mumbling about needing air. Another kept fidgeting with their phone, but wasn't looking at anything. They were looking for escape routes. The ones who once held influence in this space were losing grip, not because of conflict, but because your energy doesn't negotiate with manipulation. You don't argue anymore. You vibrate truth. Chosen one, your aura didn't just disturb the room. It rewrote the room. What was once a theater of pretense became a battlefield of hidden agendas unraveling. And you stayed calm, stayed grounded. You didn't need to say much. You were the earthquake in stillness, and heaven watched it all with holy satisfaction.
It happened so quickly they thought you wouldn't notice. Just a simple gesture, fingers wrapped around yours, a smile masking the weight of the moment. But the burn wasn't imagined. It wasn't symbolic. It was real. Subtle, yes, but undeniable. The second their hand touched yours, it was like a static surge laced with memory. Your skin absorbed more than warmth. It absorbed intention, and heaven immediately flagged it. This was not a greeting. This was a transfer. They were trying to give you something, not love, not grace, something ancient, something used, something worn by generations before you. A binding that had failed to latch onto others, so they saved it for you, passed down like a curse disguised as custom. And in their mind, the contact would complete it. Just one handshake, one point of agreement. That's all the ritual required. But they underestimated the voltage of your aura, because the moment their skin touched yours, you didn't just feel the heat, you saw it. Flashes, images, a candlelit room with chanting, a circle of chairs with names you didn't recognize, but bloodlines you felt. You saw your name on parchment, half burned, half remembered. And them, younger, more desperate, making vows in fear, vows they never told you about, vows you never consented to. And now, that moment of contact, it was their attempt to collect on a contract heaven never signed. You pulled your hand away, slowly, respectfully, but inside, your spirit ignited. Fire met fire. Not the fire of destruction, the fire of discernment. You didn't flinch, you didn't panic, but your entire nervous system entered divine alert mode. Heaven whispered into your bones, do not accept what they just tried to place on you. So you stood, silently, and in your soul, you broke it. You cancelled every agreement they tried to resurrect, every tether, every inherited shadow, every word spoken over you in rooms you were never invited to. They smiled like nothing happened, but you saw their hand recoil, like it touched something too bright. And it had. Your field was too charged, your covering too thick, your authority too established. What they meant to place on you, you reversed and sent it back. Chosen one, that wasn't just a handshake, that was a test, a ritual, a spiritual ambush in plain sight. But you've been upgraded. You carry the codes now. The light isn't just around you, it moves through you. And any curse that tries to stick to you now disintegrates on contact. Let them smile. Let them pretend. But they felt the burn too. Not because you were angry, but because you were anointed. And that anointing cannot be touched without consequence. They weren't taught to stare. No one whispered in their ears or told them who you were. And yet, the children knew. From the moment you walked in, their eyes found you. Not in fear, not in confusion, but in recognition. As if something ancient inside them remembered you.
as if they had met you in another place, a brighter plane, before time wore names. And heaven wants you to know they did. While the adults fumbled to keep up appearances, the children stood in stillness, watching, studying, not your face, your field. They didn't care what you wore. They were reading your frequency, testing your light against their memory. The youngest one tilted her head like she saw wings behind you. One whispered something to another and pointed, then quickly stopped when the adults noticed. But that moment, that was divine, pure, a sign from heaven that the next generation already senses what the current one still tries to suppress. You walked by one, and their hand reached out unconsciously, not to grab, but to receive. They weren't asking for candy or a phone. They were asking for alignment. They wanted the imprint, the charge, the DNA of awakening, because even in their small bodies, their spirits knew what was happening in that house wasn't right. Children are heaven's early warning system. They feel the shift before the storm, and they saw you, not as an intruder, but as interruption. That's why one of the elders kept distracting them, offering toys, sweets, louder games, anything to shift their gaze away from you, because they knew if the kids kept staring too long, something would unlock. Something already was. One child blinked at you twice, the exact same pattern you'd been seeing in your dreams. Another hummed a melody you'd never heard, yet knew. These weren't coincidences, these were activations. You weren't sent to that reunion just for confrontation, you were sent for confirmation. The kids were part of that. They're your proof that the light isn't dying, it's multiplying. They saw your glow and didn't flinch because it felt like home. Chosen one, the children stared because their spirits remembered what the world made them forget. And you reminded them, without trying, without speaking, just by being. Their parents may try to correct them, distract them, explain it away, but the imprint has already landed. Your presence planted seeds, seeds the enemy can't uproot. And one day, those children will remember this day, not for the food, not for the weather, but for you, the one whose light made them feel seen again. You didn't come to entertain, you came to awaken. And the youngest souls in the room, they heard you loudest. You didn't hear the shutter, that's how quick it was. A casual snap, a forced smile from across the room, a click so small it barely registered. But heaven saw it, and so did your spirit. That wasn't a keepsake, that was an activation. They didn't ask because they weren't capturing a memory. They were trying to capture you. It was mid-conversation when it happened. Someone called your name just to turn your face slightly toward the light. The flash wasn't even bright, but the moment it went off, your energy bristled. Your field contracted. Your instincts roared. That wasn't a picture. That was a pull, a tethering, a spiritual imprint meant to harvest more than pixels. And they moved so fast afterward, smiling, pocketing the device, pretending it didn't matter. But it did. It always does, especially when taken without consent. You felt off for a few seconds after, like a part of you had been tagged, your vision blurred, your stomach tightened. Heaven whispered immediately, cancel it. Not the photo, the intention. Because this wasn't about technology. It was about frequency hijacking, the kind that uses your image to access your glow later, to pull threads from your essence without stepping near you. The kind that's done in secret, unless you're protected. And you were. They've done it before, to others, to ancestors, to people who didn't know better. They stored those images in dusty drawers, family albums, ancestral binding books, not to remember, but to bind. Photographs as portals, visual agreements, snapshots as spiritual signatures. And tonight, they wanted yours, because your energy has reached a frequency that even the digital realm now reacts to. And your light, it's incompatible with their grid, so they tried to download it, but this time it didn't work, because you didn't just sense it, You corrected it. You turned inward, mid-room, and said the name above all names under your breath. You sealed your aura. You erased the attachment. You flooded the pixels with holy interference. And somewhere in that device, the image began to distort. Not because of tech error, but because your spirit doesn't allow unapproved copies. Heaven has placed a firewall around your frequency. They can take the photo, but not the glow. Chosen one, understand this. When people try to frame you, it's never just about the frame. It's about the power they think your image holds. But your energy is not theirs to contain. Your glow is not theirs to study. Your face may appear in their files, their pictures, their plans. But it won't work, because what you carry can't be replicated, downloaded, or bound. Let them keep their photo. What they captured is already obsolete, because the version of you they tried to freeze is already ascending beyond reach.
You didn't slam the door, you didn't storm out. You simply excused yourself, calm, centered, glowing, and stepped outside. But the moment the latch clicked behind you, their language changed. Voices lowered, phrases shortened, familiar words replaced with symbols, codes, sounds designed to mean more than they said, because now that you were gone, they could activate, or so they thought. What they didn't realize is that you left, but heaven didn't. An angel stayed behind, not just to listen, but to translate. And what was said in secret is now being brought to light. They thought your absence meant silence, but it meant surveillance. They began speaking in old family shorthand, phrases you remembered from childhood but never understood. Pour the second glass. Keep the gate facing south. The flame flickered twice. To the untrained ear, it was nothing. But to your upgraded spirit, it was evidence. Code passed down like recipes, not for food but for rituals. This was not conversation, it was coordination, confirmation that your presence had triggered a system they weren't ready to admit still existed. One elder mumbled something that froze the room. She's glowing like the one before her. Another tapped the table 3 times and whispered, the seal wasn't enough. And then came the clincher, a phrase you hadn't heard since you were a child. Bury it before the next eclipse. That wasn't metaphor, that was plan. That was them scrambling because you didn't break, because you didn't agree, because you sat at their table and burned through every trap with grace. Your body may have stepped away, but your field lingered. You left behind a spiritual echo, one that disrupted their pattern, the way a tuning fork shakes a locked box until the hinges give. You were that vibration, and they couldn't reset it fast enough. Chosen one, they spoke in symbols because they feared the truth in plain speech. But symbols don't protect them anymore, not from you, not from heaven, not from what's coming next. Their codes are cracking, their whispers are unraveling. Their spiritual encryption is no match for the divine decryption embedded in your name. You are the disruption they thought they had buried, the frequency they tried to silence with secrecy. But you heard it all, not with ears, but with knowing. You always knew something was off. Now you have confirmation. They weren't just talking behind your back. They were trying to activate a system that your spirit has already begun to dismantle. You always felt it, the heaviness in your lineage, the unspoken weight that followed you into rooms, into dreams, into decisions. No one said it out loud, but it was there. In the way certain family stories cut off mid-sentence, in the silence around your birth, in the way some relatives looked at you, not with love, but with expectation. You were born into more than a family. You were born into a contract, a pact signed generations ago, without your consent. Heaven just confirmed it. There was a blood agreement made long before you ever breathed your first word, an alignment forged in fear, not faith,
a desperate attempt by ancestors to survive a time of great shaking. They traded something, and you, the most radiant of their descendants, became the clause they tried to keep hidden. The "if ever born" clause. The "we'll deal with it when it comes" clause. And now you're here, and the contract just activated. But what they didn't expect, what hell didn't expect, was that you'd awaken before they could finalize the binding. You're not asleep. You're not compliant. You're not operating under inherited fog. You're operating in revelation. And that revelation is what's breaking the terms they swore would never be challenged. There was a ceremony once, not recent, ancient, dim lighting, Latin phrases, a circle. Your surname was spoken aloud into smoke. They marked your bloodline with a spiritual barcode meant to be dormant, until now, until you. The glow they feel around you, that's not just energy, that's a rupture. Your light is pulling at every spiritual knot they tried to keep tied, and heaven says, you are the undoing they feared and the healing they never imagined. Chosen one, the reason your presence causes such disruption is because it exposes the fine print, the clauses, the inheritances not listed in any will, but felt in every battle you've ever had to face alone. This is why they tried to contain you, not because you were wrong, but because you were the loophole, the one born with spiritual jurisdiction to override the pact. The moment you recognized the weight wasn't yours, you began dissolving the agreement, not with anger, but with awareness, with declaration, with faith. And as of now, heaven wants you to know, the clause has been revoked. The curse has no renewal clause. The pact cannot continue through a vessel God has already reclaimed. They'll feel it soon. Some already have. A sense that the old hold no longer holds, that the blood no longer obeys, that your DNA is shifting, because it is. You are no longer bound by what was done for survival. You are now walking in what was destined for revival. They thought they could finish it. One final act, one last spoken line to seal what they'd been preparing. But heaven was already moving. Before the final word reached the air, before the old script could complete its loop, something unseen ripped through the atmosphere. You didn't see it with your eyes, but your spirit felt it. A divine interference, a holy rupture. God stepped in and cut the ritual mid-sentence. The elder speaking began to falter. Their voice caught. A tremor slipped into their tongue. They looked around like they'd forgotten where they were, like the words they'd spoken their entire life had suddenly lost meaning. That's because they had. The spell failed to land. The last syllable collapsed in on itself like ash in the wind. The altar they thought they were reviving, nullified. The contract they tried to recite, shattered on heaven's timeline. This wasn't just disruption. This was a divine override. You were outside, maybe in another room, breathing, regrouping. But at the very moment your thoughts aligned with truth, that you no longer belonged to their grid, heaven released the interruption. Not symbolic, not subtle, supernatural. Something in the walls cracked. A picture frame tilted. One of them dropped the candle, then blamed the draft. But there was no draft. That was God breathing into the moment, declaring, "This one is mine." They tried to act normal after, to resume, to restart, but the spell wouldn't reboot. Their mouths moved, but the charge was gone. The power behind their chant had been severed, and they knew, in their silence, in their glances, in the shaking of hands, suddenly unsteady. They knew the ritual had been stopped, not by you, but by what's in you. The spirit that walks before you, within you, and around you. Chosen one, heaven didn't wait for you to defend yourself. God moved before you knocked. That's what favor looks like. That's what spiritual covering feels like. You weren't sent in alone. You were assigned angelic surveillance. And when the moment hit critical mass, when the final word of the ritual attempted to rise, the divine hand struck it down. This is why your dreams have been sharper lately, why your spirit feels cleaner, why your chest feels lighter, because the code they were trying to finish embedding in you failed. And failure, in this case, is deliverance. Don't question how. Don't try to make it logical. The divine doesn't wait for permission from physics. God saw what was forming and intervened mid-spell, because your destiny is too urgent to allow one more second of darkness to pretend it has authority.
It hit you later, not in the room, not during the ritual, but after. After you had walked out with your head high and your spirit steady. That's when it crept in, slowly at first. A wave of dizziness, a strange pressure behind the eyes, a nausea that had no medical name. You thought maybe it was the food, maybe the air, but heaven needs you to know it wasn't physical, it was residue. What they tried to place on you didn't land, but it left an aftertaste, a lingering film in the spirit. When the ritual failed, the fragments scattered, and some of it tried to cling to your field, not to bind you, but to weigh you down. It was like static in your soul. You felt tired for no reason, sad without memory. Your body wasn't reacting to poison, it was reacting to warfare. Because when you carry light, darkness doesn't give up easily. It lingers, it waits, and sometimes it tries to stay behind like spiritual smog, hoping you'll inhale doubt, fear, heaviness. But what you felt, Chosen One, was your body detoxing a battle your mouth never had to fight. God stepped in, interrupted the ritual, broke the code, and your spirit in response began shedding the trauma of the unseen. You laid down, but couldn't rest. You drank water, but still felt dry. You tried to brush it off, but the feeling followed. That's when heaven whispered, "Don't fear the sensation. It's not you, it's them. You were never meant to carry the sickness. You were built to burn it off." And that's exactly what began. Your glow doesn't just reveal truth, it purges lies. So what others absorb and become bound by, you sweat out. That's why your stomach churned, your chest tightened. It was the residue of broken curses trying to find a home and being violently expelled. That wasn't weakness. That was proof of your spiritual immune system doing its job. You may have even questioned yourself, wondered if you imagined it all, if you'd made it too big in your mind. But no, this wasn't your imagination. This was real warfare, and your sickness wasn't failure. It was the evidence that you survived the strike. Chosen One, this is what they don't tell you about deliverance. It's not always clean. It doesn't always feel like lightness at first. Sometimes it feels like a storm leaving your bones. Sometimes the soul aches when it's healing. But make no mistake, you are healing. The sickness is not your future. It's your confirmation. You left the room whole. But the air followed, and your spirit responded with divine rejection. What tried to stick is now dissolving. What tried to hide is now exposed. And soon, what you felt will be replaced by clarity, strength, and unshakable calm. It didn't happen during the reunion. It didn't happen in front of the others. It happened quietly, later, in a hallway, in a voicemail, in a glance across the garden. But it happened. One of them broke, not from fear, not from pressure, from conviction. An elder, someone you were told was too far gone, too deep in the system, too old to change, reached out, not to deny, not to defend, but to confess. You always sensed something different about them. The way they looked at you during the meal, the way they never joined in the laughter when others tried to minimize your glow. Their silence wasn't complicity, it was a shield. They were protecting you the only way they knew how, by staying close enough to block what they could,
but quiet enough to survive the circle. But now, their silence cracked, and the words came pouring out like floodwaters behind a dam. They told you there was a ritual, told you your name was spoken before you were even born, told you that you weren't supposed to survive the awakening. And when you did, when your gifts emerged early, the family panicked, not out of hatred, but out of terror, because you were the proof that the original binding had failed, that what they buried had bloomed anyway. You were the prophecy no one wanted to believe could still come true. The elders shook when they said it, their voice uneven, their eyes wet. "We were warned," they whispered. "If one came glowing, it would all unravel." And you, chosen one, were the unraveling. That's why they watched you so closely, why they tried to contain you with smiles, stories, pictures, food. But it didn't work. You moved differently. You remembered what you were never told, and that terrified them. But this elder, they were tired of pretending, tired of the shadows, tired of watching you stand alone while others whispered in codes. They told you what the others never would, that you carry the light that was promised generations ago, that your presence has already begun to dissolve the curse, not just for you, but for all of them. And deep down, they were grateful, because part of them had been praying for this moment for years, too scared to say it, but desperate for it nonetheless. Chosen one, this confession is your confirmation. You were never crazy, never imagining it. The resistance, the tension, the way they all acted around you, it was real. It is real. And now, one of their own has spoken it aloud. That's not just a breakthrough. That's spiritual justice. Let their words settle, not in bitterness, but in clarity. You're not just walking into truth, you're pulling others into it too. One by one, the silence is breaking, and every confession is another brick falling from the wall they built to keep you from your own reflection. It was never just about your movements, it was about your mouth, the sound you carry, the vibration wrapped inside your words. The glow was a threat, yes, but your voice? That's what terrified them, because your voice doesn't just speak, it activates, it breaks code, it carries frequencies their rituals can't survive. And from the moment you began to speak your truth as a child, they started planning how to silence you. Now you understand why they were always correcting you. Speak softer. Don't say that. You're too intense. It wasn't discipline, it was programming, an attempt to train you out of your own vibration. They didn't just want to muffle your tone, they wanted to rewrite your identity. Because when you speak, things shift. Rooms tremble, people remember. Codes embedded in others begin to wake up. You're not just communicating, you're unlocking. Heaven says this clearly now. The entire binding wasn't built to stop your body. It was engineered to suppress your sound, because your voice is prophetic. Your voice carries reversal. Your voice is what speaks what heaven is already doing. And that's what darkness fears most. Not the future, but the spoken future. The enemy has always targeted voices that echo God's breath. That's why your throat would tighten before speaking truth. That's why your body would react before your lips could. The plan was to choke your gift in the cradle, to silence the trumpet before it blew. But it didn't work. Even when you whispered, the world felt you. Even when you doubted your tone, God still anointed it. That's why the picture was taken, why the ritual was attempted, why the seating was arranged. Not to control your actions, to capture your resonance. If they could suppress your voice, they could distort the message. But your sound doesn't come from your vocal cords. It comes from your alignment, from your calling. And you're walking in it now more than ever. Remember when you spoke once and someone cried, but didn't know why? Remember when you said something simple, and later they said, "That changed everything for me"? That wasn't coincidence. That was your voice releasing divine charge. You're not loud because you want attention. You're loud because heaven amplified you.
They tried everything. Smiles wrapped around sabotage. Stories sharpened like daggers. Rituals hidden in routine. But no matter what they orchestrated, one thing refused to dim: your light. It flickered once, maybe twice, when you were younger, but it never died. It never disappeared. And now, it's blinding them. You weren't supposed to make it this far. According to their timeline, your glow should have been gone by now. Dulled by trauma, muted by shame, buried under the weight of inherited silence. But instead, it's stronger, sharper, louder without speaking. You carry a brightness they can't decode. Not because they never tried, but because your light doesn't come from this world. It was installed by something greater, something eternal. They thought proximity would suppress you, that if they got close enough, they could study the source and siphon what they couldn't recreate. But your light isn't transferable. It's not ambient, it's alive. It responds to intention, and when their hands reached out to contain it, the glow pushed back, hard. Not with violence, but with truth. Because your presence has always been heaven's answer to their hidden systems. You noticed it, didn't you? Every time you stepped into a room and the conversation shifted, the temperature changed. The ones whispering got quieter. The ones watching got louder. That wasn't paranoia. That was your impact. Light exposes, it reveals. And your glow made them confront what they never wanted to face. Not in you, but in themselves. They projected fear onto you, called you arrogant, dramatic, too much. But what they really meant was, we can't dull you, and it scares us. Because every day you rise, their shadows shrink. Every truth you live, their lies lose oxygen. Every step you take forward is a signal to heaven's timeline that the bloodline is healing and the curse is dissolving. You were not sent to argue. You were sent to illuminate. That's why their tactics failed, because the more they tried to extinguish you, the brighter you became. Like fire catching wind, like prophecy finding a pulse. What they tried to bind, God refined. And now, you're not just glowing, you're radiating. Long before you knew what was happening, you were protected. Before the reunion, before the photographs, before the ritual was ever whispered, heaven had already sent reinforcements. You walked into that room thinking you were alone. But the truth is, you were surrounded, not by family, not by friends, but by forces. Angels flanked you like royal guard, the kind of protection that doesn't need to announce itself. It just moves when needed. You weren't just covered, you were sealed. While they arranged the chairs and plotted the energy around the table, heaven had already placed a divine perimeter around you. That's why certain words wouldn't land. That's why the final spell fractured mid-sentence. It wasn't just your strength, it was your assignment. The glow you carry comes with a seal, one they can't see, but feel. That's why some flinched when they touched you. That's why the mirror in the hallway cracked after you walked past. That's why the lights flickered, not because of faulty wiring, but because your frequency disturbed their illusion. Heaven placed markers in your timeline. Protection that activates when danger tries to go undetected. An elder prayed over you once, long ago, in secret, and God never forgot it. That prayer is still echoing, still surrounding, still intervening. You're not just walking in anointing, you're walking in fulfilled prophecy. You are the answered prayer of someone who didn't even know what you'd become, only that you needed to be kept. That's why you made it through childhood, why you survived things that should have broken others, why your mind is still clear, your heart still open, your spirit still intact. You've been sealed, chosen one, not by religion, not by tradition, by God Himself. And no ritual, no whisper, no photograph can override that. There were moments at the reunion when it felt like something brushed your shoulder,
Moments when the room went silent and you felt a breeze with no source. That was them. Heaven's forces, redirecting curses, scrambling spiritual signals, shielding your field from frequencies you didn't even know were trying to attach. You weren't just being observed by your enemies, you were being guarded by the divine. And now, heaven wants you to know you've walked through the trap. You've stood in the presence of binding, and none of it touched you. It was never just a gathering. It wasn't about food or photos or pretending things were normal. That reunion was a test, a spiritual scan disguised as a family moment. Heaven allowed it, not to punish you, but to reveal you, to them, to the entire realm watching in silence. And now it can be said clearly, without hesitation or fear, you passed. You didn't just survive the energy, you shattered it. You sat in their circle and burned through rituals with nothing but your glow. You listened to their lies and didn't flinch. You let them speak, let them observe, let them think you didn't notice, all while your spirit was reordering the atmosphere. The test wasn't about reacting, it was about remembering. And you remembered who you were. They planned to trigger the old version of you, the one who doubted, who apologized for shining, who second-guessed her own discernment. But she's gone. What stood in her place was the upgraded soul, the glowing vessel, the divinely protected anomaly they couldn't map. And when the test reached its climax, when the handshake was offered, the picture was taken, the symbols were whispered, you didn't fold. You ascended. The sickness you felt after, confirmation, the elder's confession, validation, the way the air changed when you walked in, evidence. Every moment that seemed like chaos was actually order being restored through you. You weren't just tested by family, you were watched by heaven. And they saw it all, the restraint, the poise, the courage it took to stay seated in the trap and still shine. Because this wasn't about exposure, it was about elevation. This reunion was the final checkpoint in a season that's now closing. God needed you to see that you've outgrown the old structures, that your authority isn't pending, it's activated, that your power doesn't need announcement, it's felt. Chosen one, you passed not because you fought back, but because you stayed true. You passed because you didn't shrink, because you heard every coded word and still held your peace, because you knew something deeper than the ritual was at play. This wasn't the end, it was the unveiling. And now, the heavens are shifting around you. Angels are realigning your path. Old contracts are dissolving in real time. The people who once tried to bind you will no longer even recognize you. You didn't return to that house for closure. You returned as confirmation. They tested your light, but your light tested them. And while they rehearsed their control, you remembered your crown. You didn't lose yourself in that room.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.